if you all wouldn't mind introducing yourselves in the chat, your name and which clinic system you're with for our guest speaker today, that would be wonderful. So for those who are newer to CCSP, as a reminder, I'm Elsa Weltstein, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Colorado Cancer Screening Program. And Wesley Lighthall is on as our Patient Navigation Program Manager, who will be taking the lead on these calls going forward. So we had a new Zoom link. And today we're really excited to have a guest presenter from COCA, the Ovarian Cancer Association in Colorado, and Wesley will introduce her in just a moment. But as everyone is introducing themselves in the chat, I just wanted to provide a couple of really quick updates from CCSP. So as you all know, we are applying for the next cycle of CCPD funding, as this current grant cycle is ending at the end of June 2023. So thank you all so much for providing your letters of support for the application. We are in the final stages of finishing that application. We'll have it submitted by early next week. And then we will receive a decision from CCPD as to whether we do get funded for that next grant cycle in March 2023. So it is a bit of a waiting game in between submitting that application and receiving the funding announcement, but just wanted to give you all a huge thanks for all of your support with submitting that. And we have our fingers crossed that we will get funded, and we'll provide information as soon as we have that available. Also, we are still in the process of scheduling our programming for this current fiscal year of 2022 to 2023. But Wesley has sent out a calendar invite for our next CCSP 101 presentation, reviewing the basics of colorectal cancer screening, navigation, and the evaluation reporting for CCSP. So that will be on October 13th. If you did not receive that calendar invite, please reach out to Wesley and I, and we will make sure you receive that. So we hope that everyone who's newer can join that call as well if you need a refresher in any of the aspects. So I'll now turn it over to Wesley to add any other updates to share and to introduce Patrice.
Great. Hi, it's nice to see you all again. And it seems like the Zoom invite and calendar meeting went through well. So I'm glad that that worked out. The only updates that I have are just want to send a big thank you to the clinics and folks who wrote the letters of support for our application. Really nice to see those coming in, and we just really appreciate all the support from you all. So thank you for that. And then today I'll give a brief intro of Patrice, and then I'll kind of let her introduce herself as well. But we are excited to host Patrice today. She's the executive director of the Colorado Ovarian Cancer Alliance. She's going to be presenting about different gynecological cancers and their signs and symptoms, because a lot of this is interrelated with all the cancer prevention work that we do and the navigation that you do. So really excited to hear from her and have her share her knowledge. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Patrice.
Thanks so much. And I have to start by saying I feel a little nervous. And I think the reason that I do is well, actually, can I go ahead and I should introduce myself, but I also feel like I could start with my presentation right away. So is that okay?
That works.
All right. So just because, you know, who I am is not that interesting, so might as well start with the content. I'm so appreciative of the invite because, you know, like many cancers, ovarian cancer doesn't have a test. And so people learning about things to look out for is important. And you guys are, well, I keep thinking about the way that I wanted this to roll out. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm glad to talk to you about gynecologic Cancer Awareness Month. And part of that is that I just feel, as an advocate for women's health, that the conversation is so, you know, and it rightly should be about reproductive rights and about people determining, you know, their family size and all those things. But it's like the whole world's interested in women's reproductive parts as long as you can make a baby. And as soon as you can't make a baby, it's like they never existed. Well, they are still obviously defining parts of anybody that has female reproductive organs, and things can go wrong. And so to have kind of a full sense of women's health, I kind of feel like gynecologic cancers are a little bit like the ugly stepchild. And again, I'm not saying that this should be our foremost concern, not at all. I just think it needs to be part of the conversation in order for us to have true focus on women's health. So, and then I just wanted to say screen, there we go. I have come to believe by the launching of our own kind of a less formal navigation program, but we do a lot of work on financial advocacy, which I'll tell you about later. But I have come to believe that navigators are potentially one of the single most important things about healthcare today. And we all work with people who that you need to meet them where they are. If you truly care about improving their health, that it's about that partnership and that advocacy. And I've learned so much about it. And so I'm so in awe of what all of you do. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the front lines every day. So what I'm going to attempt to do now is show you a little Jimmy Kimmel clip, because I think it helps set the stage for what we're talking about. And I think everybody could use a little levity after easing into our work week after the long weekend. Now, Elsa, you said when I switch to YouTube, I need to look at the preview button and share sound, right? Did I get that right?
Correct. So you might want to stop sharing the screen, then reshare and make sure that checkbox is
Yes.
yes.
Multiple share sound. There you are. Okay, can everybody see this guy in a t-shirt?
Yes.
Great. Here we go.
Women have one uterus or two?
Two.
How many fallopian tubes do women have?
One.
Most women have
Shit.
most women have one uterus or two?
Two.
How many fallopian tubes do women have?
One.
How many fallopian tubes does the average lady have?
One.
How many fallopian tubes do women have?
Fallopian tubes, I'll say, and I know I'm gonna be way off. I'm just gonna say 4.
How many ovaries does a woman have?
Jeez. Ovaries, 1.
How many ovaries does a woman have?
6.
What part of the body does a mammogram examine?
Ooh, the lower half.
Do you want to point like what?
Like about there.
What does PMS stand for?
Post mental syndrome. Why are you laughing?
And how often does that happen?
Like once a year at least.
Where's the cervix
There.
and the vagina?
Oh, man. Okay. You're asking me trick questions. I don't know if it goes in this way or up through here, but it's either here or here.
And the cervix?
Is it on there? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it must be this part.
You want to just point to the stuff that you know?
That's like a baby. I know that belly fat. She's thick.
What about the urethra?
Urethra. That's that.
Where's the anus?
Oh, I think that's it. That looks like an anus. I don't know.
Anything you know on here, just tell us.
The stomach.
Do you know what this is?
Is this the mammogram device?
Okay, what about this thing?
Pap smear?
How about this guy?
Is it an IUD?
Do you know what this instrument is?
No, like not even in German, no.
What do you think it should be called in German?
Like a something opener.
How do you say vagina opener in German?
We would call it a Scheidenöffner. Scheidenöffner, yeah.
Where's the cervix?
Right there.
I'm so mortified.
Where does a baby go?
In there?
Oh, wow.
And ma'am, what do you do for a living?
I'm a gynecologist. I'm apparently not a very good educator at home for my husband.
Do you know what OBGYN stands for?
Obstetrician. A bunch of words I can't say. Gynecologist.
It's just my profession. It's no biggie.
Right.
And real quick, will you just point to the
Okie dokes. I hope that wasn't too interrupted and you could get the feel for what was going on there. And I think it's not just about making fun of men, but it's also not that far off from what we're dealing with women. And so you guys are on the front lines and you know this probably more than me. So I don't mean in any way to like be talking down to you. I just need this reminder once in a while. I'm so used to talking about ovarian cancer and body parts that I forget that that's not normal. So, and I just wanted to say, I think that you guys are also a big part because you get to have these conversations. You know, I hear our therapists talk about norming conversations, and I think norming conversations about below the belt issues is hugely important. And I think that sometimes I run into folks that are like, oh, you know, we can talk about anything these days. And I guess my point that I want to share with you is if you're feeling like that, imagine yourself sitting at this cafe with the table right next to you. And, you know, you might not think twice about saying, oh man, I was working out last week and I really pulled my hamstring and it hurts so much, you know, blah, blah, blah. In the same voice, would you say, oh man, my vagina's been hurting so much during sex? Or would you say in the same voice, without lowering your voice, I've really had some vaginal atrophy issues, and do any of you guys have that? And you have any ideas for me? If you would lower your voice, then it shows to me that there's still bias and taboo about talking about those parts of the body. So even though there should be no difference between talking about your vagina, your uterus, your ovaries, and your knee or your elbow, there still is. And, you know, and I think especially with people that work with cancer patients, you know, it's going to skew older. So those are more prevalent issues in an older generation than a younger generation, but I think we have a ways to go yet. So, so thank you for taking the time to talk about these things. Okay, this is just another one. We need more education. Now, This is from a recent poll, recent being 2020, by a women's group that did education on, do women know their anatomy? So 25% said they didn't know where their vagina is. 46 couldn't point out the cervix when they saw this. 59 suggested that a different body part body part when they were asked to identify the uterus. And then only 1 in 10 could look at this and label it. And that may not be surprising to you, again, because you're on the front lines, but I guess what I want to remind everybody is that it's difficult to get educated about a part if you don't know what that part is called. Certainly the women that didn't know where the vagina was knew they had an opening between their legs where menstrual fluid came, that where a penis might go into for sex. If they don't know the name, they can't read about it, they can't get warnings, they can't access a lot of things. So I just think this means that we are in a position where we always have to be starting at ground zero and not assuming that people know anything about the reproductive system. And again, you all may be the most in touch with that, but I got to tell you, I found this pretty shocking when I came across this poll. So sorry, I had this all, I can never get my animations to work when I'm on Zoom. So this was, I was going to make each of these points and then make a new slide.
Patrice, if you go to the from current slide button at the top left of your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Click on that, it'll put it into the presentation format, and that helps with animation.
I've had trouble doing that with my Zoom presentations with my
Okay.
board. Let's see, I did warn these guys that this was middle-aged lady Zoom time. So I think what we all face together is, women not understanding their bodies and not being acceptable to share about when things aren't going right. Just the natural thing of moms seem to put everybody else first. And so I just think that leads us into some serious, can lead us into some serious trouble when we're relying on people to tell us what's going on with them. So part of just the message also that, in working with women and working with moms is to share that taking care of themselves is the #1 gift that they can give to their family, and to make that okay and a priority. And I'm not suggesting that's going to change in our lifetime, or any of these situations change in our lifetime, but sometimes introducing concepts to people that taking care of themselves can be important thing they do for their family. Maybe they wouldn't do it for themselves, take care of themselves, but they would do it in order to ensure that they're around for their family. So I am going to spend most of this on ovarian cancer because that's mostly what I deal with, but I think the message is very similar for the other gyn cancers. So with ovarian cancer, there is no test. And so what I have found, and this is regardless of education level of the women that I talk to and the level of privilege of the women I talk to, almost all women think that the pap smear is what they do yearly to make sure that everything below the belt is okay. And if they get their pap smear, they're okay. And so if you don't even know that you have a cervix, or you don't know where it is, you sure as heck don't know that a pap smear is for cervical cancer, but that there are other parts that we have to be aware about and on the lookout for dysfunction. So just making that point that already, I mean, I can't tell you, we do health fairs, this happens nonstop. That's just for cervical cancer. It just doesn't occur to people there's more parts than get cancer or that can have problems. So it used to be that people considered ovarian cancer the silent killer, but happily that's not true. There are symptoms. And so just how And most of you are too young for this, but like, for me, 30, 35 years ago, when breast cancer was first really kind of breaking into the public dialogue about how we needed to do more about that, people started talking about doing self-exams. To me, the equivalent for gyn cancer is having these conversations and knowing what potential dysfunction looks like and being able to talk about those symptoms and advocate for yourself. So I think it's time. I'm not saying we're going to have a pop culture moment, and thank God we did for breast cancer. But there are symptoms and that every woman should know. While it does, like cancer, skew older, it can happen in women of all ages. And in fact, we've had two different pregnant women recently who have had ovarian cancer. And we've had girls. So there's obviously different kinds of ovarian cancer, like there are different kinds of kidney cancer and whatever else. But it ends up presenting a lot the same way. Because our ovaries sit so deep inside our bodies, apparently they're the size of almonds, and they're deep in your gut. And so things can start going wrong, and it's pretty easy to blow it off for a while. And that's why we have 80 to 90, over 80% that are diagnosed late stage. And so that's why ovarian cancer ends up being such a killer, because it would be just as treatable if we could find it earlier. And so part of this conversation, again, which I so appreciate, since you guys are focusing on screenable cancers, to just say, hey, how do we be a roadblock for cancer in general? I really appreciate spending this time doing this. So it's about 1 in 72 Colorado women will get ovarian cancer. The 5-year survival rate has come up some, which is great. It was under 50%. Now we've had some new drugs that have gotten a little bit higher, but I guess that shows you kind of just how deadly it is. We'll lose 25% in the first year. And it's mostly found in stage 3 and 4. The other part that's hard is that it's not one of these cancers that you use the language, oh, did you kick it? It's going to recur in most women. And so kind of the way we look at it is living with chronic disease, which is certainly happening more with cancers in general, where people can have a recurrence, survive a recurrence, and remain cancer-free for a time before getting into treatment again. But it's a real bummer. Let's see, again, mostly skews older, so mostly people 55 to 64, mostly postmenopausal. So they think that ovarian cancer starts in the fallopian tubes, and I'll get to this in a little bit. Again, anybody can get it, but it's most likely to occur in older women and postmenopausal women. So when we talk about these symptoms, you're gonna see in a second, they're symptoms we're all familiar with. But the good thing is the NCCN says if you can identify these symptoms early, because they are experienced by 90% of people in the first stage of their ovarian cancer, you could be helping save their lives easily. So this is the acronym we use, BEAT ovarian cancer. And it's bloating, eating less and feeling fuller, abdominal pain, and trouble with urination and bowel habits. So those are the 4 most common that most women will experience one of those at stage 1. Now, obviously, because if something's growing inside your body, it's gonna may also look like one of these things, right? It's going to push against your stomach, is why, if a tumor is pushing against your stomach, is why you would eat less but feel full. Or bloating that no matter how much you exercise doesn't go away. So I mean, it can look like lots of little things, and not that you need to memorize this, but just to know that those 4 are the most common. Also, we have symptom cards that are available. If any of you could order some for your office, I'd be very happy to send you some. They're the size of business cards. And they just, we use them as, heads up, look for these symptoms for women. We have survivors that leave them when they eat at a restaurant, leave it in there with the check, or just do anything to try to leverage the conversation. But again, back to this, when I first took this job and told my cousin about it and told her about the symptoms, she said, which one of these symptoms don't I have? So I think that's a common feeling, like, oh, well, these are things that happen to me a lot. So how do I know when it's something that I need to pay attention to? And what we say is, if it's a new, what doctors say, not we, what doctors say is, if it's a new symptom and you have it for more than 2 weeks in a month, it's when you need to get it looked at. So if you've never had bloating before and all of a sudden you're bloating, just because lots of women talk about bloating, but you haven't had it before, doesn't mean it's normal, right? It's got to be what's new for you, what's new for your body. And again, they can track it if it's occurring and doesn't resolve for more than 2 weeks in a month's time. That's when you get help. And what do? You go to your gynecologist. They give you a pelvic rectal, which frankly I never had until I took this job, and I asked for it because they really need to do the pelvic rectal to feel your ovaries, to get a good feel for them. That's not common. They usually getting a pelvic is still very important, but that's just something to remember. They might give you a transvaginal ultrasound, that's that wand kind of thing they put in your vagina to look around and see what's going on with the ultrasound, or a CA-125 blood test. And then I know you guys are, you're not running into people who are already diagnosed, but just so you know, the important thing is that when somebody has cancer, in a gyne cancer, they need to see a specialist. So not just a gynecologist, but a gynecologic oncologist. That's where we have, and I think that's something that's happened even in the last decade. There's been this real switch from gynecologists used to do this surgery all the time, and now I think they're in general really keeping their hands off of it. But you just need to know that's who should be seeing people for the highest level of survival. Then I wanted to add about endometrial cancer. So endometrial cancer is the most common cancer for women. And what else do I got here? I think the most important thing for me, this was a surprise for me in a way, and you would think I would have known, but if you don't know, there's no such thing as postmenopausal bleeding. And if anybody has that, they need to see a gynecologist immediately. So it even happened to me. I went through menopause probably like 2 years in, and I had some bleeding. And in my mind, I thought, oh, I guess those parts just aren't done doing their thing yet. That's not a thing. So there is no normal post-menopausal bleeding. And it's easier for us to catch endometrial cancer because that's a real, it's not hiding inside like the ovarian cancer. There is, for the women that go act on the bleeding, that's kind of an immediate engagement of a physician, and that's great. And I'm sure that you all run into that, just people just don't know what to expect with menopause. And so that's one of the things that you could be helpful in sharing, is that there's no normal postmenopausal bleeding. The other thing that's really disturbing about endometrial cancer, so that's the most common kind of uterine cancer, and it's grown, it's been growing 1 to 2% a year. So they think it's tied to the other obesity issues, but the bottom line is this is going the wrong direction. So 3 times more common than ovarian, hopefully most people can catch it early, be one and done. But let me tell you, those that don't have worse stats than ovarian. So that's no good. So it's more like 1 in 37 women. And then this is the real zinger that you all need to have a heads up on. It's much more dangerous for Black women. And they have much worse survival rates. And so this is not only about different standards of care and discrimination in our health system, it's also that Black women have been getting a more virulent kind of endometrial cancer. So it's one of the things that hopefully COCA is going to be working on in the next year, is trying to start, there's a group called ECANA that is for African-American women and endometrial cancer, to start working on education and connecting people on this front, because we have got to do, I mean, this is just a shocking stat, right? With a 90% higher 5-year mortality risk than white women. It's so, that's, and again, with a cancer that's increasing. So kind of this is back to ovarian cancer. We are like the #1 cancer that has a hereditary risk. It can be strong, but here's the thing. It's like, I had to be reminded of this. So again, I don't mean to be saying something that's obvious, but we get half from each parent. So if you're like, well, you don't think you have any cancer in your family, but your dad didn't get ovarian cancer, but you can get a BRCA mutation from your dad. You can get, even though men can get breast cancer, their chances of getting breast cancer are much smaller. So family history is not all it's cracked up to be. It's super important, but it's only half the story. So that's true for if people have breast, ovarian, colon, and uterine cancer in their family. Oh, and this is just a note saying, again, you can have no family history and still have a genetic marker. It's very true. I've worked in the Jewish community, and although it seems like the education of having a BRCA mutation is quite high, they don't know that they're more at risk. So the average, the general population, a BRCA mutation is like 1 in 500 people. In the Jewish community, it's 1 in 40. So if you have a BRCA mutation, you're going to have an over 80% of getting breast cancer sometime in your life, and up to 50% chance of getting ovarian cancer sometime in your life. And those folks don't know they're at higher risk. So the cost of genetic testing has come way down. Most insurance does cover it now. And I don't know that you guys are dealing with, I don't know if you ever see insured people or not, but it's important for people to know about that one too. So these are factors that increase a woman's chance for getting ovarian cancer: increased age, more menstrual cycles. So what that means is I'm childless, for example. So I haven't spent my ovaries, my fallopian tubes haven't had a break. They've kept working the whole time. So they think that ovarian cancer starts in the fallopian tubes, and it's from basically how many times you fire an egg out of there. And each time you do, there's some damage to the fallopian tube, and it needs to repair itself. Well, over time, there's only so many times that happens without something going wrong, I guess. So that's in general for people. And this is why lesbians and non-binary folks are also more at risk. If you don't take birth control and you've never had a baby, your chances are higher. Oh, and also obesity is also an issue for ovarian cancer as well. I just wanted to tell you guys really quickly about COCA's programs so that you just know of us as a resource. Again, I know you're probably not seeing people who are already diagnosed, but We have two kinds of financial assistance. We have one that's patterned after Census Security. If you work with them for breast cancer, we do $500 a month for 6 months to try to help low-income women through treatment. And then we've paired that with Carol's with financial navigation. So we're working with people at the very beginning of their diagnosis to try to trigger open enrollment, to try to improve their insurance, try to reduce financial toxicity of any kind early in their diagnosis so they can stay more compliant. And so they're not picking between filling a prescription and paying their rent. We have an online resource guide that might be helpful for you. I've talked to other cancer folks in the world that use this. So we try to keep it up to date, and it's basically put together from recommendations from the women that we serve in our support groups. Like, you know, if you need a wig, you don't want to just go to any store. You want to go to some place that is going to be sensitive and supportive to the cancer patient. So what we do is, again, we don't put every wig store, we put where people have had good experiences. We really believe in the power of women connecting. We obviously are not doctors and do not, you know, give any medical advice, but guess what we can do? We can put women together and they can tell each other about their experiences. And I think this, while can be kind of spooky for people, I really have seen how it impacts advocacy, self-advocacy. So, and I had to put this little, this little graphic in to tell you that how it works is, it's kind of like the good side of keeping up with the Joneses, is that when you put a bunch of women together and they're talking about their diagnosis, they may have different treatments. And one of them says, well, my doctor hasn't talked to me about that. I wonder why. Maybe she has a totally different kind of cancer and it's not even appropriate. But just learning about that and starting to ask questions, she'll go back and say, how come you're not doing this for me? It gets them used to asking questions, gets them out of fear. I just think you get so much good information from other women. Plus, you know, there's the emotional piece of, I think a lot of women, and especially women of color, are like, well, my family's there for me, and or their church. And this is where I'd love, and I know we might not have time for it today, but I would really love to get input from you all, because we're going to be starting initiative to try to broaden the availability and an interest in these groups for women of color. I understand if it's a group of white women, it may not be that interesting to, you know, to want to walk into it. But I have seen how much it helps those women. So I want to create something that's culturally, we want to create something that's culturally appropriate and provide some of those same benefits of learning about the disease, of having somebody to talk about this without your family, that you don't have to protect from the truth. I think those emotional pieces, you know, my joke is we still act like cancer is like you broke your arm and you go to the doctor and they put a cast on it. It's just not the same, right? You don't just need medical treatment for that body part. This is a threat to your life and a threat to your family's way of life. And there's so much that impacts healthcare from the stress of that. So we just really want to make sure that those things are available to everyone. And I need helpful hints on how to create that for women of color in the metro area. I'd be very happy to talk to anybody who has any thoughts on that. I guess that's it. So I'd love to answer any questions.
Thanks, Patrice. We do have one question from the chat, which was, and I think this was in reference to the endometrial cancer. But do you know of the statistics for how it affects other women of color?
There's so much about African American women. I think it may be a little bit higher for Latinas, but there's nothing like what's going on in that population right now.
Okay. And we have about 20 minutes left in the meeting time, so we can allow for some questions or comments that people have. I think I had everyone come in on mute, but feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat if you have a question.
I'm just curious if you all have found if what I was saying comported makes sense for what your daily experience is. And if you have ideas on how we all can do a better job about sharing about people's anatomies. I believe, I just saw that last. Do you want to actually read the question, Wesley?
Sure. So from Gayla, it says, why do women need to wait 5 years to have a PAP if their last PAP is normal, especially in postmenopausal women?
The United States Preventative Services Task Force is who decides how often we have mammograms, how often we have each of the tests, and they do it on empirical evidence. We are an ovarian cancer organization that wants to do more. So we started an endometrial group. We are going to be next year, we're going to be expanding into the other gyn cancers, but I'm afraid I don't know enough to challenge that. There's at least a significant body. Now that's for the PAP is for cervical cancer. And so they must have, the stats that you would have had HPV expression before then or something. But again, that won't help you. A PAP won't help you for endometrial cancer anyway. Different body part, and the bleeding is going to be your first heads up. And you can get uterine cancer before you go through menopause as well. And it's going to be just a change in bleeding, what you would usually, your menstrual cycle would be. But so if you're talking to people about that, it's not, again, what's new to you? Getting people to trust their body, pay attention to their body is probably our number, it's such a generic message, but it's so true. It's like nobody knows it but you. Like I think this is a great example. My coworker here, she's actually a 23-year survivor, which is quite unusual. When she first got diagnosed, she saw a woman gynecologist who told her to stop being hysterical. She said she knew something was wrong, so she went to somebody else who looked harder. So, I know that you guys deal with a lot of people that tell them no, and a lot of people who haven't, maybe don't feel like they're worth it. And, I don't know how we deal with those issues except for just trying to be present and sharing these messages.
I have a question. This is Laura. With regards to the USPSTF guidelines, are they going to be doing something with regards to maybe adding that rectal exam along with the pelvic exam, if that's a good way to maybe diagnose that?
I have not heard that. And like I said, I find it not in use. So
I've never heard of that before. So that's
yeah.
a good thing, I guess, doesn't sound pleasant, but I mean, at least it's another way of hopefully diagnosing somebody early with regards to ovarian cancer.
Yes, thank you. I have to say, I can testify it's not that bad. And you can tell that they're feeling around in there, and they need hands on both sides to be able to actually feel the ovary. I think the doctors tend to, I don't know, this is probably not the right thing to say, but sometimes when they know people don't like things, they maybe let them go by the ways. I don't know. But that is just one way that you can have somebody really feel around during your annual exam, to do a pelvic exam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody worried about women's health? What do you see? There any interesting stories? Anybody have any upshots on how to be more available for creating group support for women of color? How to make it more accessible so that they don't just think that crazy white rich people use therapy type stuff? Any insights on that one? It's a tough one, I know.
Well, we live in rural areas. The regions that we serve are rural, so it's difficult for, I feel it's difficult for our patients to get together, you know, weekly or monthly or whatever to have these groups. I feel they're very important. I like the fact that you said you're able to share with people that are not your family so that you're not worried about worrying them. But as I say that, I mean, again, we're small rural communities and it seems like everybody knows everybody. So
Yeah, well,
that's a tough one.
yeah. So here's something just to be aware of. If you have a woman that's going through one of those gynecologic issues, you know, we have a statewide mentor program, and because we can use Zoom and the phone, we could always connect you with somebody that's not in your backyard. If you want that privacy and you want somebody that has the same cultural background, same diagnosis. I think it's just really, again, it's the power of putting women together to help each other. And we want to do a better job of that, and we'll just need insights on how to get that done.
All right, if no one has any additional questions or feedback, as far as the business card idea, yes. And then Patrice, can I share your email with the group in the
Please
follow-up?
do. Yes.
So you
Happy
can
to
reach
send
out.
you all. We have posters, we have symptom cards. And again, it's back to norming these conversations about talking about this stuff. It's like if you do it with one person, it's somehow so much easier with the next. I've experienced it myself.
Patrice, one question I did have, and apologies if you went over this already, but for those financial assistance programs that you mentioned, how would our navigators get patients connected to those if they feel that there's someone who may be eligible, and what is the process for applying for that?
Yes. Well, so number one, you'll have my email and you can use that. There is kind of an intake form on our website. But you know, again, I don't know if you guys are seeing people that are already diagnosed. So that's kind of where I'm stuck, is that if somebody has been diagnosed, well, actually, we work with a lot of people. We're working in with two practices, one at Swedish and one at Skyridge, where all we're offering it to every woman, whether we know if she has cancer or not. She's going in trying to figure out how to get her surgery covered, and she needs to get surgery covered so they can, you know, because the bottom line is they can only guess on a lot of this stuff until you go in for surgery. It's, you know, it's still that way. You can take a picture and see something's there, but you don't know if it's cancerous until you actually open someone up. So sorry, that was way too long of just to say. So if someone's in that position, like something's going on and they need to see somebody like that, we can help. And the cash assistance is only available for people who are diagnosed with ovarian cancer. But the navigation, the financial navigation, is for any woman with a gyn cancer or a suspected gyn cancer. So you can reach out to me. You can go to the Colorado Ovarian Cancer Alliance website. There's when you land on our front page, it says start here. And but I'm happy to help. Also, our office number, you can call that. We want to get, I mean, there's just a crisis of people not even being able to get to surgery. So we work a lot on stuff like that. Because obviously everybody on this call knows access has everything to do with having money in this country, and it's just not acceptable. And so these people like you guys brainstorm on how to get people from A to B.
All right.
Anyway,
Go ahead. Anything else, Elsa, to add?
I wanted to thank you so much, Patrice, for taking the time to share today. And I also just wanted to mention to all the navigators on the call, for those that are involved with the genetic testing and hereditary cancer work that we all have been supporting with connections to Ambry Genetics for that hereditary risk assessment. Those NCCN guidelines do ask about questions that would include risk of ovarian cancer for family history, as well as other gyn cancers, including endometrial cancer. So it is, that tool is 10 questions, but is really connected to identifying those patients that are at highest risk for hereditary cancer syndrome and connecting them to genetic counseling and testing. So even if your clinic system isn't directly partnering with us on that effort, you are all welcome to use that tool to help ask about family history of additional cancers, in addition to the colorectal cancer work that we're doing through CCSP.
gosh, and I'm kind of assuming that folks might know, but that anybody who's working in the San Luis Valley or around those parts, that we, because of, you know, it's always so amazing that the Spanish Inquisition could have any impact on here and now, but because of the Spanish Jews who had to flee, and who ended up becoming conquistadors in Mexico and settling that part of the state, there's definitely higher BRCA mutations in that part of the world. So they see higher breast and ovarian, and I know you guys are probably working on that. I'd be very interested in learning more from you on that. But so those are where the higher levels of BRCA mutation in the Jewish community can come into play in that part of our state.
Great. Before I log off, just someone had a question on for ordering posters and symptoms cards. Would that be through the website or to call or to email?
No, just you can send me an email and I'll get them out to you. Just send me your address and what you're interested in, and we will process those.
Great. And I'll send your email out to everyone in the follow-up for this.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. A lot of good feedback and a lot of good information. And we appreciate it. And we'll send out those follow-up links to your email and the support programs.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks you all for the difference you're making across this state. God's work for sure.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Have a good day.
Take care all.